Hey, good afternoon, UK. This is Tim on the buzz. I'm talking to you about everything, business tech entrepreneurship. Now, we are talking about, when it comes to businesses in the UK, you need to understand that, there's so many options in terms of countries that you can work in terms of, regardless of the industry, right? So now, if you are trying to understand how far you can go with your options in terms of business or in terms of understanding what operations you can do. You need to first understand the market, right? So a market study is as important as getting into the business, right? So what we are talking about firstly is to understand what types of businesses are mostly common in the UK. And when you're talking about the businesses in the UK, you will understand that there's so many different types of businesses. Now, UK is a very mature market. It is, I'd say, a first world market. I'm proud to be, in this market and, talking about the opportunities, the market studies, the resources. There is, unlimited in terms of these. Now, firstly, to understand, the public limited company, you first need to understand the types of businesses, right? Like I said, you need to understand, the potentials or of where you can go in the market. So talking about public limited companies. These are the first type of companies that you can actually recognize in scale or in the stock market. There's where the shareholders, I'd say, could actually, invest in the company if they believe in it, regardless of which industry it is in. Now these companies are ideally, they are ideally run privately, and then they move into a public agency. Now, when I talk about a public agency, I'm talking about how, in the lines of understanding what type of market you are, what type of business you are. If the market depends on you, or if you have potential scope to grow in this business, like I'm talking in the lines of I'm talking tech, I'm talking transport, travel, hospitality, a lot of these industries, right? So what we're trying to move into is to further discuss the types of businesses. You've got a limited company buy guarantee, then you've got a private company limited. These are LTD. Now, these limit your company to whoever the shareholders are. If it is the founder, if it is it can be the founder, it can be the additional shareholders, maybe an investor, and then whoever else is important in the running of it. Now, these people generally decide how much of power they have in the business, or you're trying to understand how much of integration there is. So what I'm talking about here is, once you talk about a private company, I mean, now we know in the UK that the market is hoping to recover. There's so many people, so many economists talking about the potential for us to increase, in terms of growth. I mean, the market is only looking at growing from here, but what we think we need to consider further is how a company comes to a point before that. Now we know that the public limited company, the people can trade, day trade or invest on a long term basis. If they believe in that company, they believe in the shares growth, in the company growth, in the people that operate the company. So what I'm further discussing is to basically break down the company limited buy guarantee. Now these go as CLG. So I mean, these are a little more complicated. I'll be breaking that down as well. But what you need to first understand is, apart from the limited liability partnership, now you know, there is a couple of, I'd say, companies that need exposure, or they need to manage the partnership structures there. So limited liability partnerships are actually LLP. And then when you talk about LLP, there is the community market interest, and then you need to understand that when it comes to Royal Charter, that goes as RC. That is the type that comes into play before the last, and the last is a sole trader. So when I'm talking about a sole trader, you need to understand that there is a conversation in the lines of who and what the industry is. They basically own the whole business. They they have 100% of shares. They're responsible for 100% of the business. And then when you come in further into the understanding of what the business is like, that is basically the gist of it, right? So what else we're talking about is, when we talk about a public limited company. Now, this is in essence a corporation that is owned by the public. Anyone can buy shares if they wish. A company such as this is basically a corporation or an individual that have come to a point where they've decided on a sum of money. They've decided on a fact that only a certain amount of people can invest in it, how much of shares they're actually giving out, and to which markets, for what purposes, if they're looking at extra money for growth. These are all I'd say these are all options in terms of where they can move up the line. Now, further to talk about the interest in where these investors or the stakeholders, the shareholders are looking at going. There is about a minimum, the sum basically in questions I would talk about is that before a public limited company starts trading, they must have at least £50,000 of allotted shares. Now, apart from this, there is the PLC, and they are among one of the most common companies around. Now, to go further down the line, there is obviously the private company limited shares. Now the private company limited shares are where you understand where the sale of a limited company is usually handled in quite privately. Private companies are limited in much prime, right? And then it's similar to the ways of the public limited companies. But when you're talking about an individual's financial stability, there you're talking about how it's restricted to a specific sum, and then this sum is basically moving up towards the sum in questions. When you're talking about how these tend to be the value of the individual's investment. Now, if you are actually keen on understanding further, feel free to call us, feel free to message us. We're going to have a number up here. It's 07852473473. But what I think is easier for you is to, message us on this platform. You can actually comment on this video and ask us on any questions with regard to what type of companies or what the breakdown is on companies on the show. So to add to that, what I'm going to do is further discuss how a private company and the company limited buy guarantee changes. But before that, I'm going to put you onto a couple of videos to show you who we are at Relaks, and then I'll be right back with you with more news. That's right. This is Relax Radio, and we're with you with all the types of news when it comes to business, tech, entrepreneurship. This is the show you need to be. This is the buzz. This is Tim, your host. I'm with you all the way to 3 p.m. Now, talking about, when it comes to a private company, that is where you call it a limited private company, right? And then further going into, the company limited by guarantee. Now, these go as CLG, but then when you're talking about as far as these types of companies are concerned, there is an individual who has basically made an investment, who's not responsible for a fixed sum. But then, a company limited by guarantee has members who act like the company's guarantors, right? Now, the reason for this is because they agree to, contribute a small sum towards it, and given that the company should wind up. So basically, the guarantors agree to contribute a small sum towards the company should it wind up. And these guys are basically, I'd say, a safety net or a pillow when it comes to anything in terms of a cost or a safety issue. So where they basically, I'd say, would come to a point where I'd say they let the company run for a while, and they're not emotionally or financially, I'd say, legally attached to the company in writing. But given that the company comes to a point where they need the approval or they need the finances, they will come to this point. Now, going further into the law of the UK, and when it comes to these, they should be named as limited in their name. But there are exceptions for some companies that don't distribute profits to their members. But talking about when it comes to a limited company, they are needed for this type. They are needed for this type of operations. Now, because they are, when they're in the lines of expectations, or if it is in the lines of distributions, these companies are made for different opportunities, and they don't distribute profits to their members. So when it comes to an unlimited company, there is no restriction as such on how much money the shareholders own, or when it comes to how much they're required to pay. If it comes to unlimited company, these go into liquidation, and opposed to a limited company, these are supposed to happen to the shareholders. So these are So like I said, this is irrespective of the opportunity when it comes to the shareholders. Now, if it is, limited to the shareholders, these guys are, wholly responsible for the setting of the financial liabilities. And when it comes to the irrespective of how much they are invested in the company, now, this is what an unlimited liability company is. Because, when you come to a limited company liability, this is the next stage, right? So what we're talking about here is, when you talk about the LLP or the limited liability partnership, LLPs are not treated as legal partnerships. Instead, they are treated as if they are, incorporated bodies. Now, an LLP is, a partner who has basically the live company liabilities, but this means that they are responsible for the negligence of misconduct. So I'd say these are, moderators of the company. So in terms of shareholdings, you need to understand how much these guys control, because then if they are responsible for these in writing, they will be at least at some point responsible for the finances and where the finances are going, right? So, when the board directly employs them to manage the company, these I'd say would go into the hospitality industry. But let us know in your comments if you have any other industries that you think, these companies are necessary for. So, talking about the community interest company, company will basically be given this status if they are not looking to maximize their profits or shareholders, but if they are looking to, come to a lot of CICs. But with that being said, coming to the sole trader, this is basically an individual who is the only owner of a business. They can keep all of the business profits after tax. However, a sole trader is liable for all the business losses. and there is no specific distinction between the owner of the business and the business himself. So if you hear someone in the lines of self-employment, this is who a sole trader is. I mean, I myself have been a sole trader for some time, but I'd say there are different reasons for this. Maybe if it is the fact that you want to be the only person in control, you might want to be um, uh, the only person taking the risk. So even if you're testing an industry for yourself, right? So I'd say you actually let us know in the comments here below what your thoughts are on the industry. You can actually get back to us and comment, like, share these videos so you can actually get informed on what's going on in the business market, business, tech, entrepreneurship, like I said. So I'll be glad to, answer your questions. Feel free to let us know. Our number is 07852 473 473. And this is The Buzz on Relaks Radio.